that time of the week, a very short week. That's why we're having this episode of Cowboys Overtime here on StarTelegram.com a little bit earlier than normal. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel, always positive all the time. And I'm joined by now Mike McCarthy's good friend, Mr. Nick Harris. Nick, let's get right into this. Oh, real quick, before we get into today's topics, I want to thank our good friends at Window Nation for sponsoring this. All right, let's get into this because you allegedly got into it with the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys yesterday at his press conference. Twitter was abuzz, or X, whatever you want to call Elon Musk's propaganda toy. Nick, you had a very, what I thought was normal exchange and certainly question for the Cowboys head coach. And Mike, no, I don't think he really... I didn't think it was a terse reaction. I thought it was kind of an appropriate reaction, to tell you the truth. But if you can, take the viewers and listeners down Yellow Brick Road here of what was a fun exchange between you and the 1-2 Cowboys head coach.
Yeah, I think talking about the context is important here. And the context is that Micah Parsons, after the game on Sunday, was saying that, some players were lacking accountability. Some players needed to quit trying to be Superman all the time. And then it's backed up on Monday when we go into the locker room and cornerback Jordan Lewis talks over and over and over again about details, and about how they're not being adhered to by the entire team, and specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So Mike McCarthy had mentioned earlier in his press conference that it was a short week, so they didn't have a ton of time to get to everything. So I had asked him, I had said, understanding it's a short week and that you don't have a ton of time for corrections, when you have guys like Jordan Lewis talking about details and Micah Parsons talking about accountability, how do you still have those conversations in a week like this where it is short and you have a lot of things to do in just 3 days? And he said, pretty dramatic there, Nick. Must have practiced that one. And then he got into his answer. And did I take exception to it? Probably. But it wasn't necessarily the dramatic part. It was more so about how I rehearsed it, even though I had just mentioned something he had said not 2 minutes earlier. But, he has since apologized and we've moved on from it. It's water under the bridge. I think it's been taken into a bigger deal than it actually was. And, we get to write thousands of words about these guys every single day. I'm not going to get all in a wad over a couple of words that he threw back at me, but nevertheless, it's been something that's definitely been notable over the last few days.
Did you rehearse it?
No, absolutely not.
I've done that. The reason I ask is I
have done that too. I've done that at least once or twice, but this was not one of those. 9 times out of 10, I know where I'm going to start my question, and then it just kind of ends up going somewhere, and that's what happened yesterday, and it didn't get somewhere.
Nick, I think in those settings, I think more people should rehearse their questions, because sometimes, and I've been guilty of it, it's not like I have not, you just do this long-winded 5-minute intro to a question. I didn't think yours was. I thought it was relevant, certainly relevant. And given the fact that the Cowboys are going to play on Thursday night in New York, I think it applies here. And if you rehearsed it, then I would say anybody, good for you. Really, I think we would be more in those situations. Sometimes it would serve us well in the press conference better if we did kind of just have an idea, just to edit ourselves and what we're going to say and how we're going to say it to the person, so they give us a pretty good reaction. I thought his reaction was, I think he's full of it, but I thought for the most part, I kind of thought he answered your question. I'm not going to tell you, and we don't have enough time.
Yeah, and I think that's valid too. Looking at the short week, I mean, yesterday they only had so much time to look at film and adjust corrections from the Ravens game, and they were right on to New York as soon as 4:00 yesterday, whenever they had their walkthrough practice. So going through that, and then here on Tuesday, it's really their only day to focus on the Giants entirely, look at the film, try to game plan for the Giants, and then they're on the plane tomorrow and going to New York. So they'll have a brief walkthrough in the morning, and they might have a brief walkthrough Wednesday night or Thursday morning in the hotel, but there's not going to be a whole ton of time to get on the field and actually correct things before Thursday night.
No, these Thursday night games, and I know the Thursday thing was created for Thanksgiving years and years ago, and then they just sort of continually kind of pushed the envelope on it, even though the players hate it, and even though the product should be substandard. It illustrates just how little these guys practice sometimes in order to play the next game. All right, let's get into it. You and I were there on Sunday at AT&T Stadium for just a god-awful train wreck for the first 52 minutes. I've called it atrocious in Arlington, whatever you want to call it. It was awful. The Cowboys lose their first home games back-to-back in almost 1,400 days, excluding the playoffs, of course. And this one was awful. They couldn't stop anything. They just couldn't. And as bad as it was against the Saints, and to me, that one was awful because it's the Saints. At least this one, it's Lamar Jackson and a team that was the number one overall seed in last year's AFC playoffs, right? At least they lost to a team that should have been pretty good. The thing to me that was more depressing is that you know what the problems are, and none of it changed. And to me, that's what made this loss, as opposed to the loss against the Saints, worse. What about you?
Yeah, I'll challenge your point just a little bit there, Mac, in saying that I think as we saw late in the third quarter and especially in the fourth quarter, all the problems that have been amplified over the last couple of weeks, and it seemed to compound as that game against Baltimore kept going on. They started to get corrected. The defenses, that they found a couple of stops. The offense, whenever they worked into their tempo game and they worked in their 2-minute offense, they were able to find some points. 19 points here in the fourth quarter. It was too little, too late in the end. But I think there are some positives that you could take away from how they finished that game to take into a game against New York. Just because, I mean, up until that point, teams were running all over them. And by I mean teams, the Browns were able to do it a little bit too. They just had to get away from the run a little bit quicker than the Saints or the Ravens did, obviously. And then the Saints ran all over them with Alvin Kamara. Derrick Henry comes out, runs for 150 plus. But I do think they could take away some positives in that third and fourth quarter. But nevertheless, you look at the structure of how they lost that game, and it's very similar not only to how they lost to New Orleans or to Green Bay last year, but how they've lost games over the course of the last 2 to 3 years. They're not physical enough. They can't stop the run. And in this case, specifically in 2024, they can't run the ball to help facilitate the offense. And that's only going to become a theme and become more of a theme as the season goes on until personnel is changed in that sense.
Okay, so today on one of his weekly radio shows, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones on 105.3 The Fan is asked about, and I'm paraphrasing the question from the host, in terms of fans are mad at Jerry Jones, and that the owner and GM, he has the GM title, should be more accountable himself. Everybody's talking about accountability and things like that. And he says to that question, that's fair. And he went on, and everybody's sort of clamoring on to this comment. Nick, I've heard him own this for years and years. And that's why I put very, very little stock into it. Do you put anything into it?
I put a little bit into it just because, I mean, he is the guy who constructed these 53 players on the field at the end of the day. So you would hope there at least is a little bit of accountability on his side whenever things don't go right. And now I think when you look at this offseason and this season in a vacuum, and you understand that a lot of his decisions are a reason why they are having to play such young players on both sides of the ball. And they've had to rely on guys who do not have experience. I think when you do factor all of that in, yeah, there's a lot of blame to be placed on Jerry Jones and the front office as to how this team has been constructed and how prepared it is going into the 2024 season. I put a little bit of stock into it, but at the end of the day, I don't think it really changes anything moving forward. I think it's a storyline, absolutely, and it's a headline saying, hey, Jerry Jones is taking accountability, right. But I don't think necessarily anything gets corrected off of it. Because you ask him, hey, is Dalvin Cook going to play on Thursday? And it doesn't look like it. Hey, are you going to make any personnel changes, even though these first 3 weeks have not looked like the Super Bowl contender that you claim that your team is? Nah, we like our personnel. So that's really how you kind of look at it, and you understand, where he is philosophically, and it's not aligning with what the rest of the fan base is saying, even if he does take accountability for what the fan base has been saying since February.
Talk me off the ledge as we look for reasons for optimism. You mentioned the fourth quarter of that game against Baltimore, where the Cowboys finally started to move the ball a little bit. We had seen that game before where Dallas falls behind big, and then they start to move the ball. They score some late touchdowns, and they make what had been a blowout or a snore interesting at the end. And the Cowboys were in a position. They did give themselves as a position to make a go at it and potentially winning or tying that game. They just needed a stop on defense, and they couldn't get it. My contention is that they started moving the ball when Baltimore said, okay, we're going to give you whatever you want. Just keep the clock moving. Am I right or wrong in that sense?
Yeah, I think there is some validity in that, and I think if you're looking to take away any positives from how they finished that game, I mean, the passing game was working, and it was working to multiple different receivers. CeeDee Lamb only had one reception for 9 yards in the entire second half, and a 19-point effort to at least try to get back into the game, and in which they did. They just couldn't win it at the end of the day. I think whenever you look at the New York case, and if you're looking for positives, that is a young secondary that the Giants have. They're relying on a lot of first and second year guys. Andrew Phillips, rookie out of Kentucky, Deontay Banks, second-year guy out of Maryland, Tyler Newman, rookie out of Minnesota. I mean, these are starters in their secondary that they are relying upon. I think if you can go out there and you're looking for CD to maybe shake off some of that emotion and shake off some of that rust that he's had through these first 3 weeks, this is a really good opportunity to do that. And I think if you understand where the offense found some rhythm and they found some momentum coming off of that fourth quarter performance against the Ravens, I think they could take it right into New York. But it has to be taken with the approach that, hey, you don't have a running game, so don't try it.
Well, you mentioned CeeDee Lamb. I'm glad you did, because, you wrote a good piece in the Star Telegram after the game where I don't know what you say, you called him out necessarily, but you called a spade, which is CeeDee Lamb's got to have some accountability, and he's got to grow up some too. I mean, I know you want your players to care and to be passionate. It was the same issue they had with Dez Bryant and other guys too. I mean, but we saw it in the game against San Francisco last year where they got crushed, the regular season game. And then almost immediately, like a kid who needs sugar, they started giving him all the junk food immediately, and then they mollified him, and he was good. But this is a guy consistent that we have seen and I don't care what anybody says, body language matters. Now, it doesn't win a game, but if you're sitting there sulking and pouting consistently, it's an issue. And he did not play well in that game. You called him out nicely, professionally, I might add. But, in terms of this, are we apt to see him come out on Thursday night and they're just going to start force feeding him the ball, more or less, just to shut him up?
Yeah, I think you call back to a situation in San Francisco last year, and you see whenever he spoke up and he was like, hey, I need to be throwing the ball, and he got thrown the ball, and the offense ended up getting a lot better when that happened. and maybe it's a sense where this is kind of circling back, and I think there's even a bigger necessity to throw him the ball because Jake Ferguson is not at 100% health. You don't have the running game you had last year, even though it was kind of mediocre last year. And there needs to be a sense and there needs to be an intention to force feed CD the ball. Now, if there's an intention from opposing defenses to shut him out and, to bracket him or put a cloud over him, then you start using that pre-snap motion that you used last year to free him up. And that was something that wasn't really integrated until about week 6, week 7 last year. And you look at how much they've integrated pre-snap motion. They only used it on 10 offensive plays against the Ravens. I mean, that's you compare that to the rest of the league, and especially offenses that are starting to really find a rhythm, whether it be the Shanahan offense or the McVay offense. They're using motion 2-3 times every drive. So to be able to integrate that, I think it's going to be able to open up CD a little bit more. Those are the things I'm looking at in New York, especially against the young secondary. Like I mentioned, you throw motion around, you throw some disguises from your offense pre-snap, it's only going to make that job that much more difficult with those rookies and second-year guys.
Okay, we've got more to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime, but first we're going to take a break to listen to our great friends from Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys. Serious commitment. Back here on Cowboys Overtime, StarTelegram.com. He's Nick Harris. I'm Mac Engel. All right, let's get into the hard part. Can they really fix what has been an atrocious, historically bad run defense? And along those same lines, given the fact that they don't want to promote Dalvin Cook, how is this running game going to get any better? So let's just say, you're the surgeon. Doc, Make it better. All right, Nick, make it better.
I think run defense, I think there is a way to make it better. I think there is a lot of truth in the sense from Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence calling out other teammates being like, guys just need to do their jobs and things will work out. Because you see that on film. They're asking the second level to do way too much. You're asking Eric Kendricks, Damone Clark, DeMarvion Overshown, Maris Liufau to play two gaps at once, and a lot of times in the run game, they can't do that. They need guys up front that just do their jobs. They focus on that. They fill up running lanes, and they're able to limit these 8-9 yard runs to 2-3 yard runs. I think there is a path to figuring that out. I think if you're asking me, the surgeon, be like, hey, I think we can make this work. I'm not going to give you a 100% guarantee, but I think if certain guys do their jobs in my surgery room, we can make this happen. Run game, I'm telling you, look, man, you got 3 months to live. I think from an offensive run game standpoint, they have to be able to figure out how to get another guy in this building. I don't see how it works. They have. And do they have one though, Mac? I mean, we're looking at Dalvin Cook last year when he was with the Jets. Awful. I mean, you're looking at his yards per carry. It was under 3 yards. He wasn't as reliable as he's been in pass protection during his time in Minnesota. And look, Dalvin has credited to, hey, I was never comfortable in New York. They never gave me the opportunity they promised me. Is there some truth in that? Maybe. But we're looking up 3.5 weeks into the season, and there still isn't trust in the building to put him on the field or even put him on the active roster. So there has to be some sort of disconnect there between fan expectation and what Dalvin Cook can actually bring to the field. I'm one of those guys. I had to see it to believe it, and I haven't seen it from Dalvin Cook since he's been in Minnesota.
The issue that I have with Dalvin Cook, people who take exception to Dalvin Cook, and I think anybody who sits there and thinks that we're going to see the Dalvin Cook from Minnesota here with the Cowboys is asking too much. The concern I have about when you evaluate running backs on a team like the Jets last season when they lost Aaron Rodgers, like the first snap of the season, is that they had a quarterback that no defense respected. Yeah. The Jets knew that the opponents were not going to do anything special at all to deal with Zach Wilson because he couldn't play. So what do you do? And I've seen it here, a number of situations when the Cowboys have thrown out backup quarterbacks, Matt Castle, Brad Johnson, name them. And the opposing defense is like, okay, we can cheat up and we can just sell out to stop the run because this guy doesn't have the arm accuracy or confidence to make throws, NFL caliber throws. He just doesn't. And I think if you're the running back in that situation, like Dalvin was, you've got no chance. I shouldn't say no chance, but they're asking you to do things that maybe your younger version could and your current version can't. Now you put them with the Cowboys with an offensive line that I think right now you would agree with me is kind of erratic, but a quarterback that can make NFL caliber throws, and they will respect that. And that gives a running back a chance. What we've seen and why I'm calling to see him is that we've seen what these three guys can do, and specifically the old guy in the room. I didn't like it when they brought him back. I think bringing back Ezekiel Elliott was a bad idea. You and I talked about it at the game. A lot of this has to do with pass protection, which I understand. And if you don't trust Dalvin Cook in pass protection, that's a different issue. But we are seeing nothing. Like, we talk about a historical bad run defense. I mean, Nick, you crushed it at the beginning. You're more right than I thought you would be. This running game is giving you nothing. And there's no indication that they can give you anything. So that's why I'm like, if this is what they're going to give you, then what's the hesitation? And I understand some of this comes down to, are you going to cut? Like, are you going to kick off the 53? I get that. But I'm seeing nothing from any of these three guys right now that they're giving the ball. And even more alarming, I'm not seeing a lot of guys who have a lot of faith in terms of coaches that Zeke Elliott can give very much. Talk me off the ledge if you can.
Mac, I think you're going to start laughing when you see where I'm about to go with this. But what if I told you that there was a guy on the 53-man roster who is a running back that you have not given a carry to, and you have not tried to see what he can bring in the running game just yet?
Go.
Hunter Lippy's the man. I mean, he's a guy that can get you 4 yards a carry. If it has to be a Hillis situation where you hand off to the big white guy, you make it work. I mean, he is the guy who has been reliable when he's been called upon. Yes, he had the goal line fumble in Miami last year. He was a rookie and he made that mistake, but they've called on him time and time again in the passing game so far here in the regular season, and he's provided. And you look at what he's done on special teams. He's provided. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and be this all-pro running back. I think he's just a little bit better than what you got, or at least what you've thrown onto the field so far, because you look at what you trusted on Sunday against the Ravens, you didn't trust any of those guys. You only gave Ezekiel Elliott 3 carries. You look at Rico Dowdle and the carry share that he's gotten through the first 3 games. Yes, it's probably been a product of how these games have gone, but nevertheless, you're not trusting him in big-time situations. They get 2 2-point conversions. They need to just convert on one of them, and they don't trust the running game in either of those situations to pick up 3 yards. And so in that sense, they have to be able to look at some other options. Hunter Lipke's at least the guy that they don't have to figure out a roster spot for. He's already there.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I know you were pounding the table for him the other day. And, given what the other guys have done, I don't see how any coach could necessarily outright poo-poo that idea. And I think we're discarding him because he's a white fullback, right? But you need something. And there's just nothing right now. And I know they've tried Deuce Vaughn. I think he's got a little bit more action there in week 3 than we had seen. And he's got a little something. Well, okay, maybe that's it. And I think the other issue that we need to talk about here is I think the play of their starting tackles, right and left, has not been great. I think we're asking these running backs sometimes to do things when the blocking has been, like I said, kind of erratic at best. Terrence Steele doesn't look like he's been the same guy since he had that injury 2 years ago. He's been okay, but not the guy that he was when they signed him to the big contract. And the rookie at left tackle, Tyler Guyton, looks like a rookie. Giant guy, athletic. Sometimes you look really good, and other times you're like, whoo, that's not so good. And I think we have to at least acknowledge when it comes to the running game, some of this has to do with an erratic offensive line. Yes or no?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the Tyler Guyton case specifically, and I tried to calm some expectations after he came out these first 2 days of training camp, and he's stopping Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, and everyone's calling him Tyron Smith reincarnated. And I'm saying, hey, guys, this is still a guy with only 14 starts at the right tackle position from college. He's had to move to the left side. He's still getting used to being on the left side. Yes, he was still protecting a blind side in left-handed quarterback Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma last year, but there are still some things that you have to be able to work from a forward standpoint, from a hands perspective. I mean, his hands are still super wide figuring out on that sense.
Well, and I think the other thing, too, is people sat there and said, oh, this is Tyron Smith 2.0. If you go back to Tyron's rookie year, he was good. He was pretty good, but he was a rookie. And when you're at tackle, not guard, tackle, that's a much harder position because you're in space. You're a little bit more vulnerable. The one we fell in love with because he didn't have many of those moments was Tyler Smith last year, because when you're a guard, you don't have to move as much. And Tyler's a hell of a player, don't get me wrong. Okay, we got one more thing to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime, and that is the actual game. Not on Sunday, but on Thursday. The Cowboys go to New York to play the Giants. The Giants are 1-2, having defeated the same team as the Dallas Cowboys, the Cleveland Browns. It looks like a season that had so much hope and optimism in Cleveland now has gone to the middle of Lake Erie, straight into the bottom of it, probably here shortly. Cowboys come in as a 4.5-point favorite. 4.5 points. I have been, horrendous at picking this team so far. I mean, awful. This is another reason, good God, it sounds like I'm going through puberty again. This is another reason why I don't bet on games, that and I hate spending money. We saw it last night in Cincinnati. The NFC East is a little unpredictable. Washington comes out, and their offense looks amazing under rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels. Daniel Jones, the quarterback of the Giants, is not Jaden Daniels. I don't know what to expect. this feels like a make or break game for the Cowboys if they're going to have any prayer at all of turning this thing around. I think they're going to win because I think the Giants are terrible, and I don't think Daniel Jones is any good. So I'm going to say the Cowboys are going to win, but they're not going to cover 4.5. What about you?
Hey, I'm 2-0 on these so far, and I'm with you, Mac. I think they win this game, and I do not think that they cover. I've been saying 27-24 these last couple of days, so that's what I'm going to roll with.
Well, I'm listening to you, okay? I'm done doing this, although this is a fun anecdote to share. I am there's 4 or 5 guys, middle-aged dudes like myself, and we have a pool where it's like $100. It's nothing. We just have fun with it, mostly as a means to stay in touch and, have fun. So one of the bets was a couple weeks ago. I don't know if I should share this. I can. It was the over-under on CeeDee Lamb's receiving yards against the Saints. And it was 90.5 yards. And I thought, okay, this Cowboys will score some points. CeeDee will get his yards, and he'll get the over. Okay. So I put a bunch of points on it. So it's like some point system. So I put a bunch of points on it, and I asked Nick before the game, hey, Nick, what do you feel about this? He's like, oh, yeah, I feel pretty good about it. It'll be an over 90. Okay. So the first half starts, and it's 90.5 yards. CeeDee gets 6 catches for 90 yards, and then he doesn't get a catch or a yard the rest of the game.
Yeah. That's tough. That's a tough beat. Bad beat there, Mike.
That is a bad beat. All right, Nick, any other words of wisdom or advice or things that we should look forward to on the game Thursday night in New York?
Just no matter what happens, don't be dramatic, Mac.
That's a good one. All right, Candy Bolden, thank you very much. She's our fearless producer. For all of your great Cowboys coverage needs, be sure to check us out on StarTelegram.com, specifically Nick Harris's fine work. Cowboys at Giants on Thursday night. Expect interesting. Thanks, Window Nation. We'll see you next week.